Well, everyone, welcome to World at War Comics. My next guest, so excited to talk to you, Mr. Liam, creator, writer, world builder, and we got a couple amazing titles. We had Savage Sword issue number 11, where you kind of took over the entire thing this round, which I absolutely loved. And then, of course, we have Spawn: The Dark Ages. Liam, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, thanks, Tommy. It's yeah, what a month. It's been kind of mad. I love how it's turned out. I mean, I get a whole barbarian month, which was like unexpected, but kind of that was great. It's great. So
I could not
yeah,
think of anything more proper than Liam Sharp having a Barbarian month.
well, it's nice too because I think because that happened, there's a little bit more cross pollination between the two books than there probably would have been otherwise. So that worked out pretty nicely. And I know there's quite a few Conan fans that have picked up Spawn Dark Ages and the other way too. So it's good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of fans are certainly aware of all the amazing work that you've done in Conan. And then, like you said, I think there's going to be some cross pollination as they see Spawn: The Dark Ages, which is another kind of barbarian style story within the Spawn universe. I think a lot of people are going to be touching Spawn maybe for the first time. And then hopefully the same thing is going on as those Spawn fans want to see more of this barbaric art style that you have, which is just so beautiful. They might be able to get over to Savage Sword. And right now, if you pick up issue number 11, you're going to get quite the treat from Liam, because this is the Liam show in this particular issue, which you cannot get enough if you love your art.
I think it's selling out, that one, which is great news. It's quite hard to get hold of.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased about that, of course. But they later on they do a really nice volume collections of them as well. So volume 4 will have that in it as well, which is great. And I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Some people I really like the Savage Sword magazine issues with that pulpy paper, and it just feels really old school. But some people like the slightly whiter, higher quality paper and the blacker ink on the volumes they put out. But I mean, either way, you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little old school. Obviously, in the US, right, the monthly floppies are still pretty strong, although we're starting to see that transition like the rest of the world, because really the rest of the world is more of a trade consumer, right? So you're usually getting a little bit thicker, a few more issues all at one time, which is much more popular around the world than it is in the US. But I feel like we're starting to see that style of collecting take over in the US as well, as people want to sit down and be consumed for a little bit longer than 15 to 20 minutes on your normal kind of floppy. I don't know if you're experiencing that as a creator yourself.
I'm sort of in legacy mode at the minute. I don't know if you can see, but I'm getting all the Corbin collection that Dark Horse have been putting out, because I've always been a Richard Corbin fan. And I'm actually sort of getting a whole bunch of books that I used to have when I was a kid and that have got lost over the years. So I'm sort of, and I'm really, doing Conan and to some extent even Spawn: The Dark Ages, because I did that in the 90s, so it's a long time ago. It all feels kind of legacy at the minute, which is a nice place to be. It's and I think it's interesting too, because I'm definitely playing towards that older group of fans, followers that have been around with my work, I guess, since a lot of them since the early 90s, which is, I always find it absolutely amazing. But I'm also finding there's a bunch of new kids and new readers that are discovering the joys of this kind of work, because it is a little bit different. It is old school compared to a lot of stuff that's currently coming out. But yeah, I mean, being in England, we've always been used to that kind of the European influence, and the kind of they do the 40 page albums. And I started out with Don Lawrence, who was a legend, and his stuff was always coming out as sort of 40 page, slightly over larger format, fully painted material. So yeah, we have a little bit more, we're a little bit closer to it over here than in America. But I lived in America for 12 years, so I did see that kind of love of the classic floppies that that is over there. You know?
For sure. I mean, what Titan has been able to do around Conan, kind of a resurgence of Conan. Some of us who have been Conan fans since, the Roy Thomas days. I have quite the collection of Conan, the Marvel run. I am absolutely loving to see everything that's happened with what Jim Zub is doing on the monthly, and then obviously what the entire Titan team, which you are included on the Savage Sword side. I
Yeah,
not be happier to see this resurgence and a lot of new fans touching Conan for the very first time. And now you're starting to see even some of those old Robert E. Howard, Ace books, or, some of the older ones that are a little bit harder to get. You're starting to see, like, on eBay, those things pop up and they're getting a little expensive and harder to find, because I think people want to understand kind of the history of Conan and then all the other characters that came out of Robert E. Howard. I don't know if you're getting a lot of questions about that. I mean, obviously you've been in
yeah.
the world for a while.
I mean, it's I often say my introduction to Conan was sort of threefold at three different times. So the first thing I remember seeing was one of those books, the with the Frazetta cover,
Yeah.
and it absolutely captivated me. And I would have been about 8 or 9 years old, and I didn't buy it even, which is like frustrating, really. But I remember going into this newsagent in Park Farm, which was a little shopping centre up near where I went to school. And every time I went in there, I stood in front of this little book and stared at it, and everything else disappeared. And I was just captivated. And then one day it wasn't there, and I was like, "Damn it! What was that thing that briefly passed by me?" And then, of course, as you're saying, in the 70s, the Savage Sword, I started becoming aware of that and picking that up from newsagents and absolutely loving it. That was the first time I sort of came across Buscema. He was my first comic introduction to it. I later discovered, of course, Barry Smith, who became a huge ongoing influence through me for the rest of my career so far, really. So there was that. And then, of course, when the Arnie movie came out, I was exactly the right age for that. And very excited to see it, because by then I'd read some of the books. By then I was really properly invested in the comics. And, to me, Arnie he just looked like Buscema on the screen, maybe a bit more of a broken nose, but he pulled off physically, he was the right shape. And the soundtrack was great. And while, I know purists get upset about it not being canon and everything, for me at my age that I was then, I just fell in love with that. And the soundtrack was incredible. James Earl Jones, you can't go wrong with.
Yeah.
And I didn't even mind, the fact that Arnie had this sort of rich European accent, because to me that was like, this is like ancient, this is the Europe. This is like an ancient culture. It's so all of it fitted for me.
Yeah.
So that really, that's what I mean. All three of those things inspired me on some level, and it's it's great to finally get to do my own take on it. I found I was going through some old stuff. It was in the attic, and my mum had it, and it was an old breakdown of The Thing in the Crypt, and I'd obviously read it and was writing a comic script without ever having seen a comic script, and trying to imagine what that might be like. And I realized that, like, this was me attempting around about 15, 16 years old to do a comic adaptation of The Thing in the Crypt. It was a nice thing to find. I posted it on my Substack, actually, just because it's, it just shows how invested I was even all those years ago. And in a way, it's weird. It's taken a long time, but I'm kind of glad it has, because I sort of only just feel like I'm now good enough to do it as well as I wanted to, that I always dreamt of doing it. I wanted it to be right. If I could make it right. So, yeah.
I think you nailed it, Liam. I think you nailed it, my friend.
Yeah.
We were talking before we hit the live button. The last time I saw you was at a Frazetta panel with Sarah Frazetta and quite a few other amazing creators and historians of Robert E. Howard. And you talked about the influence that even Frank Frazetta had on your art style and everything that you wanted to be. And you talked about seeing that, like, whether it was an Ace book or one of the other small books with the Frazetta art. did you immediately, when you saw that, did you start kind of drawing and looking at more of his art? And how much did that really influence you over the years?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's funny how, again, it's different periods. So it was, I remember that Frazetta really, really clearly. And then I discovered an art book of a Boris Vallejo one that I really loved. Um, and you know, for a short while, then it was like I was all about it being absolutely realistic and that really perfect kind of like almost photographic realism as far as the anatomy was. And then rediscovered Frazetta, and then fell in love with that and realized that his stuff had a kind of different quality about it. I mean, people say that one was copying the other. I really don't see that they're both painting in oils and they're both doing barbarians and fantasy stuff. But the styles are so massively different. And I think the approach and what they're trying to achieve is very different.
Yeah.
And I just see in Frazetta stuff this incredibly earthy, solid. You have a sense of being there. You know, Boris's stuff might be more realistic in terms of like the reference and it being spot on anatomically, but the Frazetta stuff makes you feel like you're there. You know, the Boris is a little bit more sort of ethereal and dreamlike quality to it. I love those early Boris Savage Sword covers though that are kind of. I think Buscema, I could be wrong, but I think Buscema did the layouts, so they have a kind of Buscema quality to them, and they're just there's the famous one on the cross when he's been crucified. And then there's just another one where he's sort of standing with his horned helmet, semi-profile, and he just looks so beefy and yeah,
Just classic,
it
right?
never went away.
Yeah. Just classic. Yeah. Actually, I was going through my old here's a Boris. This is Savage Sword issue number
Yeah,
1.
that was fantastic.
It's incredible. It's
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful. One of my pride and joys.
unique actually. I'm working on another Conan piece right at the minute. So
Oh,
that hang on.
incredible. It's so gorgeous. So good. The detail, Liam, that you are able to bring forth on the pages of a comic book is just insane. I just want to shine and obviously give you some flowers here, my friend, because as I was reading Savage Sword, the detail that you do in your backgrounds is just next level. I don't know how long it takes you to produce some of these, especially like the full page spreads that you do. But I mean, the detail. I mean, we're so I don't know how to explain it, but
Well, I
it
mean,
just pops. I mean, it's incredible.
there's no getting away from the Barry Smith influence on those things, and some of it's those beautiful prints that he did for Gore Blimey Press. There's the Apollo one, which is just chock a block full of beautiful objects, as well as the two main characters. I think it's Apollo and Aphrodite. I think it's Aphrodite.
Yeah.
And Barry Smith always populated the world with things that were either symbolic or they just sort of grounded it. They were objects that made the place just feel like a real place. Because sometimes with comics the world building is sort of second place in a way, and it's all about the character and the narrative and the kind of forward motion of everything, and just really about the two protagonists that are in the story. So some comics aren't as involved or as sort of, they don't seek to create the world as much as tell a sort of dynamic narrative story. I have to say a lot of this is down to my training with Don Lawrence when I was like 18, 19 years old. He was an astonishing world builder, and always put stuff in there that, I remember him sort of saying to me that one of the things that he found frustrating about American comics was that sometimes everything looked like it was all made of the same material. and he sort of instilled in me that, you know, fur has one texture, rock has one texture. Well, not even that. Rock has many, many different
Yeah.
textures. So even if you're doing like a mountain, don't just stick to one texture. Or, you know, if you're doing a kind of copse, a little bit of woodland or something, don't just make all the leaves look one texture. There's hundreds of different plants in one small area, you know. So all of those kinds of things that are stuff that I think about when I'm doing that, you know. Uh, just it might be, it's sort of, it's not important to the flow of the narrative, but it's an invisible thing that if you get it right, then you will feel more sort of placed in that world, and you won't be taken out of it by sort of flashy technique or anything. It's like you just feel, yeah, that's right. That is fur, that is skin, that is a tree, that is a trunk, that is, you know, a bit of woodland or a tundra.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I find myself staring at some of your pages because of the detail, and I'm wondering, like, Easter eggs. You bring a lot of history, like European history, biblical history. I mean, a lot kind of gets this two-page spread in Savage Sword. Like, I need to spend like an hour just staring at the faces on the wall. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. So everything that you just said, really, the example is right here, from the tree to the facial expressions. I mean, it is. I don't know, how long does something like this take to be
Oh,
able.
that was, you know, I knew it was going to be right at the heart of the story.
Yeah.
The Horde was kind of about everything, because
Mm,
to me, it's like that thing where Conan is smart and he's had like jewels turned to dust in his hand before. So he's not, when he's walking through that, to me, that's like a really key bit about the character of him, is that he's not being swayed by it, he's not being impressed by it,
yeah.
because he's like, yeah, this is all going to turn to dust because I'm not in a regular realm at this point. There's a lot of magic shit going on. So I'm like, I, he's not, you know, he's just chomping on that apple, and which he just throws away. And he's just being completely casual and cool about it. And yet there's this incredible opulence.
Yeah.
You know, and some of it, it was like I did want to do something that had a Barry Smith kind of vibe, but also a Michael Kaluta vibe. A lot of my heroes influenced an awful lot of that story. So there's a lot of, you know, I said I was in legacy mode earlier on. There's a lot of stuff in that story that is me paying homage to the giant's shoulders that I'm standing on.
Yeah.
And, you know, hopefully doing them justice and doing them proud. And, you know, this is all part of a legacy. We're all part of a legacy. Every artist owes a debt to the artist before. That's just how it is. And you know, you want to honor that legacy and sort of carry it forward in a way that is a doff of the cap to it, but also hopefully something sort of it's fresh, you know. And sometimes things come around. It's like when Bernie Wrightson did the Frankenstein book. For all of the fact that he was basing his approach, you know, on Dore through Booth, it's still, so you look at it's a Victorian approach, and yet when he does it, there's still this modern edge to it, and there's still something that we haven't really felt like we've seen before. He brings a new freshness to it, that is, you know, and now that is being carried on by other people who are looking at that and being inspired by that, and you have sort of generations and generations sort of informing the future. It's one of the nice things. It's the same with anything. It's like music's the same, and you know, you start going down those rabbit holes around music and who inspired, you know, ink spots inspire Elvis. Elvis turns in could have been Meatloaf. You know?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's yeah, good fun.
Here's a great question from Henry. John Buscema inked by Alcala. There's a bunch of. Do you think that inkers have influenced your style as much as pencilers? Because that's the final image you see.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a big fan personally of the Alcala stuff. I know John Buscema didn't like it, but to me, it just, again, it's my love of stuff like Wrightson and Booth and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The sort of Victoriana illustrative approach. It was was almost less comics and more illustration. And I loved the kind of form and textures, and he made stone feel like stone, and the skies would have sweeping kind of. They felt like they were moving. Everything had incredible richness, and also a certain amount of darkness about it as well, which I think really informed that whole sort of, again, the world building. It just the world of Conan feels like it is a dark, tough place, filled with shadows and lots of texture and lots of just
It's cool.
details.
It's
but,
cool.
but beyond that as well, I would say Barry Smith massively informed my inking. I used to have a more stylized approach when I was starting out that was much more sort of leaned into the Barry Smith approach, and I learned a lot doing that. There's bits of it still with, I think it's more in the details that we were talking about earlier on, but there's bits of it with cross-hatching and some of the black placements and things like that. And probably the way I put blood on the figures, is quite
Yeah.
decorative. Barry Smith did it in an almost decorative way. Made the blood splats almost like jewels in a way. They were almost hanging off him in sort of resplendent kind of finery. But I also have to say, in the inks, there's no doubt at all that Frank Frazetta, in his black and white stuff, has informed a fair bit of it. And also, I would be wrong of me not to nod to Tim Conrad, who comes to the Earth stuff he did with Barry Smith was extraordinary. And some of the landscapes were amazing. He would do a whole spread of a sunrise, and you'd see animals, and you'd see plant and fauna, and the flora and the fauna sort of really layered through the whole imagery, creating just incredible vistas and space and a sense of place and journey as well. I always liked that thing, the idea of within a story, if you could not just have the action beats, but a sense of a journey. I'm really keen on that kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely comes across. Well, that kind of takes us to Spawn the Dark Ages. In that first page, right off the bat, you have Orleanus. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Absolutely incredible. Look at this spread right on the edge of a cliff. The next page, deciding the timing is now, and that jump that he makes right here, land. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I would love to know from Liam, when did you start piecing this story together for the Dark Ages? Obviously, we're seeing it now, but I have to believe with the world building that you're doing, kind of the Celtic, that whole European, history that you're bringing in. I feel like there's a little bit of biblical history in here. I would love to get your thoughts on the research that you did before and the timing that led up until we now have this in our hand.
Well, a lot of it comes from very old loves, an old love I've had of basic mythology right the way through. I did a book called Starhenge, which for
Yes.
Image, which is my own sort of magnum opus, and that was me really sort of expanding upon my love for that particular era. And where it came from is, like, when I was at school, I did a subject called Classical Civilizations, and it was all about mythology, and it was about birth of democracy. It was largely about, but mostly Greek, some Roman, and we'd touch on the mythology, and it would be the Roman and Greek mythology, a little bit of Egyptian. And I was always really fascinated in that, and I had been since watching, like, Jason and the Argonauts when I was a kid, and my dad buying me a book called Legends of the Stars. So I always had this fascination with mythology. And there's a point where you sort of realize that I know more about Roman mythology and Greek mythology than I do about the mythology of my own country and my own historic legacy and the legacy of this island. And so that became really intriguing to me. And there was a book by a guy called Nikolai Tolstoy, who was Leo Tolstoy's grandson, but based here. He's a wealthy peer with a huge fascination in the Arthurian stuff. And he did a book called The Quest for Merlin, would have been in the early 80s, which I kind of got a bit obsessed with, really. I even did a sort of bit of a pilgrimage around the country to go and see some of the sites that he talked about in the book. The premise of it was really had Merlin truly existed. And in that book, there are references to Aurelianus and the king and where these things could have come from, but largely, and not Mallory, but the precursor, before Mallory, and the history of the kings of Britain, as well as the prophecies of Merlin. And that was by, my brain has gone completely dead. I usually don't freeze on his name at
Oh,
all.
you're good, Liam. You're good. Yeah.
God, Geoffrey of Monmouth. Sorry, Geoffrey of Monmouth. Geoffrey of Monmouth is really, God, I can talk about this for ages because it's fascinating to me. There's a whole load of stuff. Okay, I'm going to tell you this because this blows my mind. So if you take it back a little bit, and this is going back to the Romans, studying the Roman stuff, we studied the Aeneid by Virgil as one of the epics. That book was really written as a piece of propaganda, I think, for Augustus, the emperor. And the premise is it's very, very similar to the Odyssey, except instead of Odysseus, it's Aeneas. And Aeneas goes through the whole very similar adventures and eventually gets and founds Rome. And then all the emperors of Rome are therefore related through Aeneas to the gods, because there's a demigod aspect there. So it was really saying, here's this emperor, Augustus is a god, and we should treat him like a god. So it was propaganda. What Geoffrey of Monmouth then does in the history of the kings of Britain is he says that Aeneas has a son called Brutus. And Brutus sets sail, and then he gets to England, lands on Totnes, puts his foot on the Totnes and founds Britain. And all the subsequent royalty of Britain are therefore related to the Roman emperors who are related to the gods, which is fascinating given that Geoffrey of Monmouth was like a priest. But he's saying, yeah, but you're related to the Roman gods. So all of that is really fascinating to me. And I cover a lot of that in Starhenge. But in the process of doing that, obviously, I spent a lot of time in the sort of 5th century, that sort of period, post-Roman Britain, looking at all of this kind of material. And Aurelianus is cited as late Roman, post-Roman, but still, there would have still been a lot of Roman stuff knocking around, possibly an influence for King Arthur, even been cited as an influence for Merlin, although that doesn't seem to add up to me. So he was like a starting point for me for that character of like, okay, let's not do the Dark Ages right at the end of the Dark Ages, like the first series that I did in the 90s, because that was verging onto a medieval period. And I just thought, if we're going to call it Dark Ages, let's do the Dark Ages. And then you look where it starts, and the 5th century is, round about where it starts. So I thought, if we go right back to the beginning, then we can spend the rest of, however long we want doing series that run through that period, moving forward. So then it became, okay, what would be the situation for Aurelianus in that time? And then you're going, okay, going back to the stuff that Tolstoy had put into my head about this whole, this is a period of transition where the Romans have converted to Christianity. They're being pretty evangelical about it. Christendom is a uniting thing, having a monotheist God. It became a big uniting force all the way across Christendom. So then you've got that, which means that all the old pagan gods, whether it's the Roman gods up over on the mainland in Europe, or pagan gods, Celtic gods in Ireland, Britain, up in Scotland. So then there's an internal issue of like Christianity versus those pagan beliefs that had been established and how that's shifting. And the fact that the Romans were in power, so that would have been sort of enforced. Mm-hmm. And then this notion that you've got attacks from you've got Picts at the top up in Scotland, so there's constant sort of scuffling going over there. You've got the Saxons coming in from the east, and in Ireland you've got the Hibernians. So that was called Hibernia. They're raiding as well. So basically Aurelianus is like, what the hell am I going to do? I'm getting attacked on all sides, and my own people are split into two different camps around Christianity and paganism. I need to find a way to unite it. Spawn is the kind of, in this story, he's like a stand-in for the Lord of the Wild Hunt, and he's taken over Londinium, which has become overgrown with a forest, and he sort of haunts that. And there's a kind of propaganda story there in a sense that people are terrified of him and think that he's riding through the night and stealing women and children and dragging them off to Londinium to live like in this sort of spooky, scary horror kind of situation in the ruins, which of course isn't really the case. And he just has to pull these two together. And then I thought, who is this Spawn character? And then I thought, do we need to know at this point? I liked the idea that he was almost like a Clint Eastwood man with no name type character. You know, he's got so much presence and power and strength, and this kind of almost he reminds me a bit of Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein. Actually, I've got to be clear about that. Well, you know, it's definitely an influence. So I just thought, you know, I will start figuring out that in the back of my head, but I'm not going to let that intrude into what this story is. And then the whole thing after that is like, it becomes a kind of Shakespearean melodrama, really, where it's like there's people coming together, there's unity, but there's other people who are very opposed to that, and there's people trying to undermine it, and there's people trying to create, you know, a whole other issue. And then there's the Nunes character, the female druidess, who starts to play a bigger and bigger part as it moves forward. And so there then ends up being, you know, a triangle of betrayal and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it gets very Shakespearean as it goes on.
It really does. And boy, is it gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. But I love that you're bringing in all of that history, the Roman history, obviously Europe, Scotland, Ireland. There's like a little bit of everything. And I love the writing style that you're utilizing throughout the entire story, because it does suck you in to that kind of time frame within history. How difficult was that to do?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because if I had a real worry about it, it was that you know, and I have seen like a couple of comments from people who are like, well, it's a little bit too sort of wordy, and you know, there's words that I don't understand. That's hence the glossary.
Glossary at the end.
I was a little worried that some people would be put off by the fact. And I wanted a king to speak like a king. I wanted the speech at the beginning of the battle to sound like a, you know, Henry V type of, you know, St. Crispin's Day delivery. You know, how's he going to rile up his men to fight this indomitable force that's coming in? So, you know, he's got to be a great leader. This is a great general. And I needed him to, you know, once you start writing, it's like, I didn't want to just make it all modern and try, because you can try that, but it does lack something, you know. And when you do start to look up old dictionaries about words that were used, old English words, and there's some great ones. You know, I love Jew beaters, for instance. I love the idea that, you know, when they're running away, the idea of cowards running away, their feet are beating the Jew as they disappear across the horizon. Just words like bespalling and even devil is like, looks cool when it's written down as deerfall, you know.
I do love it too.
I'm glad I did it, but I was worried. I was worried that it might alienate a few people.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly right. It takes a little bit more work to read it, but I think it's worth the exercise, because you do get sucked into that time frame. And if you didn't have that, it would be, I think, a little bit more generic. And also with your art style and everything that you're doing through here, I feel like that old English is extremely important to bring forth, because I think it almost brings forth the art even more because you are just delving right into it. You feel like you're standing right next to him as these conversations are going on, which I appreciate it. I mean, there's a lot of amazing comic books that I read that are a lot more simpler to read. You don't have to use your brain too much, right? Superhero type stuff. I love that. Don't get me wrong. But I don't mind a little work in order to be drawn into a time frame that I think it accents the art style that you are bringing forth in this too, and the detail that goes around that.
Th-
Um,
I mean, honestly, I did a lot of work. The script was revisited again and again and again, and I kept tweaking it and tweaking it. At one point, it was probably twice as long. So, for all if it seems wordy now, imagine what it was like, you know, before that. That this is the edited version. Um, so I had to cut some long long passages out. But I did want it to feel like, again, just a good meaty read, because the story isn't overly complicated if you can get into the language. Then I heard someone say the first 3 pages was a bit like, oh, okay, and then they just settled into it, and then it was fine after that. It sort of got into the rhythms and the beat and the kind of flavor of it. I didn't want it to. I mean, I really love Shakespeare, so to me, that was like, if I could give it a little hint of that. Shakespeare can also be, if you haven't spent a lot of time with it, it can be even way more impenetrable than I've made it. So I didn't want it to be that impenetrable. But I didn't want you to have to be dissecting every single paragraph. I hoped it would be, still an enjoyable, sort of fairly smooth read once you get going.
yeah, personally, I did not feel that at all. I didn't think it was too wordy. In fact, I mean, obviously setting the premise of the story. After that, I feel like there's a lot of action, and I just get mesmerized by your art, to be quite honest, and the backgrounds and the details. I mean, look at this page right here. All the bodies, these poor folk that were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
More Barry Smith homaging there going on, the Toppenny Conan battle stack. I stopped wanting Conan and I stopped wanting that. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. So my understanding, right, this is a 6-part series. Are you already working on maybe a second arc after these 6, or
Yeah,
is it going to be? Oh, excellent! I think fans
yeah,
will really appreciate
I've made a start at it. It will depend on how well this does as a series before we get to the second one. I will say it's a really quite a different book, but I won't explain why. Because this 6 issues is very much a complete story. It's a complete arc. It, and again, it doesn't matter because there's so much we still don't know at the end of it that we can move forward with it. But in terms of Aurelianus, this is a very complete piece of work. So anybody coming to this, if you've never read Spawn before, that really doesn't matter. You're going to get a completely satisfying 6-issue story about a particular time and a particular set of events, with a little smattering of magics, not too much, and quite a bit of mystery. A few questions left unanswered. So.
Absolutely love that. Henry had a question right here. Tom Conrad did a Robert E. Howard concept called Almeric in a Marvel magazine, Epic, which Epic is an incredible magazine. Have you seen his art for that?
I have indeed. I have the collected Dark Horse version as well, which is amazing. The Epic Illustrated was a big influence on me. And Tim Conrad's work for Elmure is extraordinary. And the same thing goes to what I was saying about the Worms of the Earth stuff. It has the same kind of world building where you just get a sense of like this vast place. Incredible. There's a tower in Elmeric where every single detail is done, and he does it from a top-down perspective, which is extraordinary. And then you see it inside with a top-down-up perspective. Yeah. It's just an astonishing piece of work. No, I'm a huge fan. I know he was spending like a week on every single page for that thing. So, and it shows. So, I don't know how he stayed alive, fed himself. But I'm trying to, with all of the work I'm doing these days, I'm trying to actually take a little bit of a beat and allow myself the luxury of occasionally doing something like that double page spread that you showed earlier on.
So
That took
on the Conan, you mean? Yeah,
that
Conan.
a week to do that one, and it's nice. I think it adds a little bit more to the work. You obviously, there's no way I could keep the roof over our heads if I spent a week on every page.
Yeah.
But your choice picks about which ones you're going to go to town on, and it does. It's nice that they're your money shots, I guess. So you build it around those pages. You probably wouldn't want every page to be that dense as well, because I think you can. It doesn't. It would change the rhythm of the story. Sometimes you want to be moving through a story fast, so you don't want to be slowing the reader down, and you don't want the art to be getting in the way of action and fighting. There's a scene in, I think it's issue 4 of Spawn: The Dark Ages, where it gets a lot more stark, and the drawing is more basic and almost a little bit more brutal, because it's much more about an action and what's happening, and the focus isn't on, if I initially I was going to cover the castle walls with tapestries and just go completely mental with it, and it's like, no, if I do that at this scene, it will totally stop you, and you'll stop looking at the action, and you'll just be looking around at all the knickknacks and the details. So I had to really sort of think about what serves the story and what moves things forward. And also, once you've done the world building, you don't have to keep repeating it. It becomes, after at some point, it's like showing off. It's like, well, that's not what this is about. You're trying to tell the story. Everything should serve the story. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, there should be some treats throughout the story and time frames where you can delve into that. But like you said, in action scenes, I'm not sure you need all of that. There's going to be plenty to, I think, feast your eyes on, as blood is flying everywhere and swords are swaying everywhere. I think that's plenty enough to whet that appetite for sure.
Yeah, basically, the rule of thumb is like, when it slows down, then you can take in the landscape and the environment, but when it speeds up, not so much.
Yeah, like a conversation, right?
Yeah,
like a conversation, which is the spread.
Really nicely to the next issue that's out, is a snow-covered one. So I love that that's coming out in December. It's all a big battle in the snow. So the timing's actually been really good as far as that's concerned.
I love it. I love it. What I don't know what you are able to kind of share just on other things that you're working on, maybe things that have already been announced, but obviously we have the Dark Ages, you're delving into Conan. Can you want to talk a little bit about some of the other things you're doing, or is there something that maybe is coming next year that's apart from that, or are you really kind of sticking to these areas?
No, there is something next year, but I can't say yet.
Gotcha.
I just got confirmation on it. It's way off in a different direction.
Really?
People very happy, and it's characters I've never drawn before.
Nice.
But that I love and have loved since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So and I've done most characters. So somebody, that's good. That's going to be fun. It's a contained project, but I'm going to leave it at that. I am doing more Conan. I'm halfway through a 74-pager.
Nice.
Which follows on from my first short one, the 11-pager, the Wuthering. This is a sort of sequel to that. But
was that I can't remember what issue that was, 8 or 9, maybe. Yeah.
Issue 8, the Wuthering, and in the Wuthering, he's young. In the follow-up, which is called The Lost Soul of Drenadieu, he's post-king. And he's trying to find his place in the world and figure out, what destiny even is and what his destiny is. So that one's, it's a kind of epic follow-on from that 11-page starter. So I'm really enjoying that. As I say, just past the halfway point on that one. So that's ticking away. And again, like I say, we've got this. We've got more Spawn on the back burner. So really, if all of these things come through, I've got about the next year and a half is fully stitched up, which is good. But just got to get the balance right, and
Yeah.
keep that the heart in it all. I'm loving all of these so much for all the different reasons. It's like it's just literally last night I said to my wife, after we got back from our night out with our friends, I said it's really funny, because she said you just seem really happy now you're back in England, and like you seem more just relaxed and good about everything. I said, well, yeah. I said if a prophet from the future had come into our kitchen 15 years ago and told us all the things we were going to do and that I was going to get to do, I could, how could I not be happy at the moment? Because it's like so many of my dreams come true to finally get to do Conan and for it to have landed like it has, and to revisit Dark Ages, but to get to write it. And there's just so many little things that have been wonderfully sort of fortuitous, and it was all really kicked off by the Wonder Woman stuff 10 years ago.
Classic.
And that just really changed my life in a wonderful way, and I've not taken it for granted, and I've worked my ass off for the last decade, and and it's been nice seeing it solidify into what feels like some really lovely appreciation for the work that I've been doing. And I got to work with Grant Morrison on 24 issues. I mean, how wonderful was that?
That's amazing.
Garth Ennis, who I've known for years, but I've never worked with him. So we working with him on Batman Reptilian, and it's great. Greg Rucka, all of these fantastic writers. But I am really enjoying writing my own stuff now, because that's another thing too. So like just to be imagining that at this point I can finally be writing pretty much everything I'm doing.
Yeah.
To do Starhenge, which was massively important to me. It was something that had been on the back burner for so long, and so many interests in that. And what I'm finding too is at all the conventions I go to, lots of people want more Starhenge.
Absolutely.
So I've got to find some time to try and figure out how to do that and fit it in. But we do want to go back to it for sure.
Yeah.
When I say we, I'm talking about me and my wife, because she is definitely sort of a co, not necessarily co-author, but I couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah.
Without her support and all of that. So I see someone's just asked if there's a book I always wanted to do.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too. Is there a title or a character that you always wanted to do that you haven't had a chance?
That's the one.
Say that again. Sorry.
There is, but I can't tell you because that's the one I was talking about.
Okay. Very good. Fair enough.
But it's not an obvious one. Yeah. I don't think it's something that people will immediately go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense."
That could be refreshing too for you, though, right? To do something a little bit outside of what I think fans are used to you doing. That could be a lot of fun too.
At the moment, I seem to veer between sci-fi and fantasy, and that's all right with me. They're my two strongest suits, I think. And this is definitely going back more into sci-fi territory.
Yeah.
But it's also more of a traditional sort of superhero action type territory, which will again be interesting because I did some of that in the Green Lantern, obviously, but this is more contained sort of universe than that. So it's going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. And then we got another amazing creator, writer, Daniel, who I absolutely love. Liam is a powerhouse of talent. We, the Spawn fans, are lucky to have him back in the Spawn unit. Absolutely, Daniel. And if you're not reading The Curse of Shirley Johnson, make sure you get out there. This is an absolute fabulous Spawn title. Daniel, thanks for joining this morning. But I couldn't agree with him more. Liam, you're such an amazing talent. We are spoiled as fans to be able to see your work, and I absolutely love it.
Cheers, Daniel. It's good to see you in New York.
Another amazing creator. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Liam, as far as where fans can meet you, do you have plans? I know you've done San Diego because I saw you at San Diego. You've done New York. Do you have plans in the U.S. or in Europe to do any more cons over the next year?
you coming up next year. Next year is really interesting. It's madly. It's my 40th year since I started in the industry next year, which
Amazing.
scary.
Yeah.
Well,
Incredible.
yeah, in '87 is when I started with. Well, '86, sorry, is when I started with Don Lawrence as his assistant. Um, so it was. Yeah, it's going to be a special year. I've got Athens coming up in 2 weeks, so I'm going to be in Greece for that.
Wow.
And then next year I've got Como. A good again. This is going to be a special one for me because we're going to have an exhibit of my art at that Como convention.
Oh, wow.
Um, so and it's going to be the Conan stuff specifically, I think, um, at the moment anyway. But we've got time to decide on all of that. And I'm putting together a portfolio for that as well, a Conan portfolios, which I've been sharing 7 original pieces of work based on some of the most famous stories or characters. So I've been doing that. I've been having a lot of fun with that. After that, we are traveling south through Italy down to I'm forgetting which con it is, but it's the one near Vesuvius. I should know this stuff. I know more about Vesuvius than I do about people will be able to work it out. There's
Yeah, yeah.
the one weekend of Como, so the first weekend of May, I think.
Wow. Do
And
you
then
make any of your pages available at some of these, like some of your original art too? Will those be, available to
always goes through Albert Moy. So that's albertmoy.com. He's my dealer. And yeah, he's great. He has some amazing stuff. He has Frazetta and Wrightsons and just incredible stuff. Whenever I'm at a con he's at as well, I spend forever just going through the astonishing art that he has. And I just feel very lucky to be, part of that little gang
Yeah,
of with Albert.
it's a pretty
Um,
good group to be part of, Leo.
yeah, and then the weekend after that, there's an English con. It's basically 2000 AD based. It's called Lawless, and that's in Bristol, and
Mhm.
that is the second weekend of May. And I'm also going to have a 40-year um, exhibition of work at that show too. They've very kindly invited me to bring a bunch of stuff down. So the idea at the moment is to take 40 pieces from sort of across my career. We'll be putting that up for the weekend and that con. As for stuff later in the year, I've had a bunch of invites, but we have so much going on because those cons are like literally 3 weekends in a row.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to get back and do a bit of work after Lawless. But there's almost certainly going to be other shows that we usually get. But I mean, we did New York and we did next year. Normally every 2 years I'll do Baltimore. Next year would be that second year. Been meaning to get up to the Mohegan Sun one, which is a good one. We did Portland. We've done Seattle. Yeah, I mean, I get around. I get around
Yeah, yeah.
as
Would
much
love
as I
to see you in, Dallas Fan Expo. That was a pretty good one this year. I don't know if you get down to Texas, but we'll get you barbecue if you come.
can. I haven't been for a while to Texas,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, we'll see. Again, it'll just depend on timings and all of that. And I've been invited to South America as well, to Brazil, so maybe that'll happen as well. We'll see.
I've heard that one's an amazing one. I've seen pictures and it looks phenomenal, the one in
Yeah, I
Brazil.
think it's like the biggest in the world at the moment, so it's insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, this year's just been crazy because I was also in Australia, Sydney, and Perth, and I was in Holland, and I was. It's just so many. Yeah, I feel at the moment the idea of too many more
Yeah.
conventions around the world is a little bit like no more.
Little daunting, I
We're
assume.
going to get through Greece, then I can take a little break before Como.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you said your original art, is that the Albert Moy?
yeah,
Yeah.
albertmore.com.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna put the
he's
link down here. I found it right now. That way, if you are interested in purchasing some of Liam's original art, which I'm looking right now. I'm a big Green Lantern guy, so I would love to have like an original piece from Green Lantern. But there's all kinds of really cool stuff here.
I
That you,
often say to people, if you've never, if you've fancied collecting art, original art, and you haven't dipped your toe in it, and you're a little nervous about it, there's things you can do, like there's very reasonably priced things. If you get a page that hasn't got a major character on and isn't a big splash page. I mean, some of my best pages are ones like that. You know, there might be another character, but I would have put like a crazy amount of detail into a tree or something like that. And often I'm like, they're my favorite pages, but they'll be going for like $500-600. You know, that kind of price. You know, it's fairly affordable.
yeah,
And art, comic art doesn't go down in it just, you know, it stays the same, it goes up. They're great investments, but I never buy art to be an investment anyway. I stick it on the
yeah,
wall. You know, I love my art. I'm not trading it for anyone.
yeah, exactly.
It's staying on my wall where I look, you know.
Yeah, we got a Death's Head 2 comment here. Loved your design for Death's Head 2. Wanted it to be more successful than it was. Felt like it was the wrong environment and you didn't find a home, so to speak. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, he was a huge success, really. He sold 500,000 copies, which is crazy. It's probably, you know, it's amongst my biggest successes ever. It was a different time,
Yeah,
but it was a massive success. The weird thing was, and I don't know why this is the case, but I think he's just one of those characters that people just liked it when I drew it,
yeah,
and I don't know why. It's the same as like Alan Moore
mhm,
with Captain Britain.
mhm.
No one can do Captain Britain like Alan, and it's hard to even understand why, but it's not right unless it's Alan.
Yeah,
Uh, Lobo, it's not really Lobo unless Biz is drawing it. You know, it's not quite right. And there's been some great stuff, and that's not to knock the other guys that have done it, because there is, of course, great guys that, you know, great artists that have had a go at it. And you know, I don't think I could do it as good as Biz. You know,
yeah,
it's just what it is, and you have to sort of accept that. And for some reason, I just think Dessa 2 was my boy, and maybe because I invented that costume and invented the look, and you know, he was just, I knew him because he was part of me.
yeah,
And I think maybe that was the case with Alan, and then maybe that was the case with Biz. You know, you look at Biz and Lobo kind of tied at the hip. um, you could
exactly.
say that, like, the best iterations are almost versions of the person. You know, there's two versions of Slane, for instance. When Glenn Fabry did Slane, it looked like Glenn. And it felt like Glenn's work. When Simon did it, it became Simon.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And then just as people are looking at at your site, there is that piece of Hal Jordan looking up into the sky that is available and very reasonably priced. But I couldn't agree with you more. That is such an. I mean, I obviously love your art, but yeah, the Green Lantern, anything you did in Green Lantern is
that
just
spread, I don't know if you've noticed, but the horizon line
yeah,
mirrors the face just
yes,
slightly. Yeah, and I did that. But there's so many little details in there that no one would have even known about, that me and Grant kind of thought about. There's a bit where there's an asteroid comes down in the back of a love making scene, but the sky in that one, where they're looking at the stars in the sky were the stars in the sky at that time, because we found a site that would project the future into that date when it was due out, and so I literally created that, put it into the picture. So the stars for that day were the stars in the sky. I mean, it's just crazy. There's no reason to do that, but they were. And no, that's probably the first time I've ever said this, but that's the levels of detail that we went
yeah,
to.
no reason to do that, but I did it, and I love that.
Yeah.
Look at it, it's already sold, but already some of your amazing art from the Dark Ages.
Yeah, so crazily, the Spawn stuff, that whole everything available from the first issue went. It just
Yeah.
went immediately.
I
I
will
love
say,
people
not
are asking about
being a little bit part of kind of that Spawn fan base, I've never met such dedicated people around the Spawn universe. So, Liam, if you're going to put stuff out there Spawn related, I feel like that's going to go extremely fast because it is an incredible group of people that love their Spawn, man.
Well, and honestly, it's I was the stuff I'm doing is very different to the other Spawn books. So I was again nervous whether the general Spawn fans would would take to it or not. But you have to just do it with integrity and do it with heart and do what you know and do the kind of story that you're good at.
Yeah.
And just sort of hope for the best. But it seems to be landing, so I'm happy about that. It's not just the fandom as well, though. I mean, Thomas is just such a
Oh,
great guy to work with. He's so sort of he's trusting. He's easy. He has a nice manner. The way the suggestions he has are always delivered in a like a conversation kind of way. So it's not, you never feel like it's a directive. It's all part of a conversation, a creative conversation. And he's just a really good dude.
agree more.
Yeah, and I feel very very lucky to be with literally all the teams. The heroic signatures team that take care of the editorial on the Conan books are superb, just fantastic to work with. Chris Patera,
Yeah.
brilliant bloke. And I'm just right now. I'm just in my complete happy zone creatively. I'm working with wonderful people, and I'm doing the books that I love most in the world. So it's incredible.
I mean, with what you've given to the comic book industry, Liam, I mean, all creators deserve that, but you certainly deserve what you've given to the comic book industry to be in a place where you are working with the people that you love to work with, and you're able to. I think it. And you correct me, I'm obviously not a creator like you, but I feel like that really helps and feeds what you're working on at the moment when you do have that kind of comfort working with people like that, right? I think it draws even more out of you. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, how important it is to work with people.
You something really interesting there, because what I've realized is that even if you're working on a character that you didn't read yourself as a kid, like for instance, I was never a massive Green Lantern fan, mostly because when I was growing up, you couldn't get those comics. I never saw them; they weren't on the shelves, and they weren't readily available to me where I lived and where I was growing up. They just weren't there. But whenever I did see him, I was like, "That's a cool looking character. I like the look of him. I love the design." So I never sort of thought when I started getting into comics that was a character that I got to draw Green Lantern. I've got to draw it. What you find out, though, is all of them, whether it's Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, the ones that have got legs, the ones that keep going and have become iconic, that have this weird X factor, there's a reason that they have, and when you start doing it, you fall in love with every single one of them. They have this quality that is very hard to pin down. But it's absolutely there, and it's absolutely real, and it's the X factor that that makes one over another, that gives something legs, makes a book last for 85, 90 years. And whenever so I really find whenever someone asks, what's your favorite character, I would generally say it's the book I'm working on, because I've fallen in love with it as I've been doing it, and it's obviously Conan's a different one, because I've been banging on about Conan since time began, and it's I've had so many near misses. It's like, oh, damn it. And then finally, to get to do it is great, but yeah, I mean, many characters. I never set out to draw Wonder Woman. I absolutely fell in love with Wonder Woman when I was drawing that book. To the point that when Greg decided his time was up, I was like, oh, hang on, I don't want to stop yet, and thankfully DC let me do the Brave and the Bold, the one with Batman, which is in a way kind of precursor to the Conan work again, because it's world building and it's more mythology, it's Irish mythology this time. That was largely something for my father-in-law, who he's sadly passed now, but he's Irish, and we used to all talk about the Irish myths all the time. And he used to say, "Just you've got to draw one about the Tuatha De Danann and the Foam Wars and all of these guys." And you know, thankfully, I just got that one up and running before he died, so he was very happy about that. So that's what I was dedicated to him, really. But yeah, it was kind of, yeah. I mean, it was the precursor, I think, to. Somebody said that looked like you were trying out for Conan in that book, and yeah,
A little bit. I mean, Wonder Woman kind of fits that with her mythos and everything too. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense that some of that is added to, the world building within her universe as well.
well, madly as well. I got the offer to do Conan and Wonder Woman at the exact same time, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
Because in my heart, I was like, "Of course it's got to be Conan," but I couldn't stop thinking about Wonder Woman, and they're like this crazy life-changing choice. They're like both on the table at the same time, and it just became really clear that Wonder Woman was going to be right. It just in that moment it became. I thought a good relationship with DC at that time, and as it turned out, Dark Horse ended their tenure with the character anyway, and so it would have started and it would have immediately stopped.
Yeah.
So I definitely made the right decision in that case. But I sort of thought that you could go probably more easily from Wonder Woman to Conan than the other way around.
Yeah.
And without that opportunity, I never thought of it, and then it was suddenly there, and I just thought, actually, what is it I love about Conan? And I thought, well, it's the fantasy aspect and the world building aspect, and I thought, well, it's kind of all there in Wonder Woman too, So if I just applied a different kind of thinking, and then I was a little bit worried, weirdly, at the time, but because I hadn't done a big book for a long time, I was a bit worried that I might lose momentum if I was doing Conan. Then, if it was all in one world, and I might start second guessing myself and worrying about everything. And I thought actually doing Wonder Woman would be kind of possibly more interesting in that it would allow me to sort of switch between superheroics, sci-fi, fantasy, and just have kind of more different things that I could draw that might make it keep the momentum going a little bit better for me. And that was just me being just not wanting to fuck it up, really. And now doing the Conan stuff, it's like, well, of course you're not going to get bored. It's Conan. It's world building. Still, there's still so much you can do. So
Incredible. Yeah. Incredible. Do you have a preference between grayscale or black and white and color? I mean, you do both so well, but man, there's something special about Conan, especially in Savage Sword, to have the black and white. I think it's very unique to Conan because of the history, but it's just so beautiful. I don't know if you have a preference between the two as an artist.
well, again, I'm the longer I go on, the more I sort of feel like my work is starting to define itself into two very specific and clear categories. One is like the stuff that I'm coloring, whether it's Starhenge or Spawn, and then there's the black and white line work. I love both. I grew up primarily on black and white comics because most of the stuff that we read in England was American reprints in a weekly format, printed in black and white. So whether that was the Hulk and Rampage or the Star Wars comic, which had some fabulous backup stories, or there's a Fantastic Four one that came out, and I loved all of them. And of course, Savage Sword of Conan, which was black and white. So from that point of view, we as Brits, and 2000 AD was largely black and white too. That was what we were used to. So when I'm drawing a page in black and white, I'm never thinking this is going to be colored, so I don't have to put these details in. To me, I have to draw it well enough that it's a finished piece of work, even if it is going to be colored. I like the idea that it could be printed in black and white and still work.
Yeah.
So the black and white is finished art, and then you can add color if you like. The other thing I would say though is I also grew up loving heroic fantasy and science fiction artists like Chris Foss and as I said earlier on, Boris Vallejo and Jeffrey Catherine Jones, Michael Kaluta, Barry, all of those guys. There's so many of them. I've got the Dragon's Dream Roger Dean books that came out in Britain. I don't know whether they made it over to America, but they tended to be sort of celebrations of particular fantasy, science fiction, or just popular culture artists. And I didn't know. As a young kid, I was definitely comics. Somewhere in my teens, I was like, maybe I want to be a fantasy illustrator like a Frazetta, or I wish. Jeffrey Jones, all of these guys were my heroes, and I could definitely see that could have been a trajectory for me. And then I met Don Lawrence, and his stories were painted comic strips. So again, I'm seeing full. That's where my training is. So that's my first year in the business is training with Don Lawrence, and then by the time I get into 2000 AD, they started to include a lot more color. And so when I was doing the Judge Dredd stuff at that time, often they would have a painted spread in the middle. It was a barrel scanner, so you'd paint it and then you'd peel it off and stick it on a barrel and scan it. So painting and color work has always been as big a deal to me. Richard Corbin, was obviously had his very own particular interesting Photoshop photographic technique where he break it into plates, see him work color plates, amazing. All of that stuff was like, yeah. So I can't separate it. It's really about, I think, what is the story? What is the world you're trying to build? What's going to service the story better? When I did Reptilian, for instance, it's like reading Garth's script and talking to Garth. It was like both of us were very much of a mind that Garth, who's not, famously isn't a massive superhero fan, was very did love the Arkham Asylum book, the Dave McKean book, which I adore Dave McKean. He's one of my absolute heroes as well, and Bill Sienkiewicz as well. I know it's not the same, but you can see that Dave and Bill, particularly early on, there was some sort of very similar. There was a similarity between them. A very similitude or whatever. What's that word?
Yeah. Similarities. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were talking about it, it was like, well, if we do that book, wouldn't it be cool if it has a kind of it's set in the same universe as Arkham Asylum, and it has that kind of vibe. And if you put the two together, it does kind of read through almost like it's in the same universe. Yeah. Starhenge, it kind of had to be that way. I couldn't imagine it doing it any other way. But it was nice having the character of Amber Weaver being an artist and processing the world through her art. Yeah. And so you could have, and she's obviously a big comics fan, and so I could do little bits where it would sort of be in kind of there's a bit right in the middle where I make it like a retro book with traditional inks and all of that. I know it'd be interesting to see where that goes moving forward with that whole story. We'll see. And also, with that, I got to do my daughter did a few of the pages too, which was amazing. Awesome. Yeah.
Runs in the family for sure. Have you do you have a lot of or any collaboration with some of the other Conan artists like Robert De La Torre, Doug Brathwaite, who is phenomenal? I'm a big fan of Doug. Are there other artists like right now in Conan or anywhere where you're looking at and you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive stuff?
I've written a story for Sadat, which is great. He's got an 11-pager, and he's doing a Conan story. Yeah. So that was fun. That's like the first time I actually wrote a script for another artist, and he asked me to do that for him.
That's amazing.
At the moment, I mean, there was one for heavy metal that I was trying to get together with me and Chris Westerman going to try and do, but I've just not had the time.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes you just got to, you just wait for the right
Yeah.
window and the right moment, and
But look at
hopefully,
Conan, right? Timing was everything.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, no doubt if I can get back to Starhenge in the next 18 months, which would be ideal, really,
Hmm.
that I'll definitely be pulling Matilda back in for a few bits and bobs on that. Um, she's superb, and I know she's doing some incredible work, which I can't talk about either because it's not been announced. But she's doing
Okay.
really well for herself. Um,
That's
she's
amazing.
highly independently of me as well, which is wonderful. She was discovered, and they had no idea that I'm her dad. They still don't know I'm her dad.
I think
So I'm
that's awesome.
very proud. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Well, Liam, how can people follow you? I know I follow you on Blue Sky, on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
Are those the two that you're mostly active on?
And Facebook, I'm pretty active on, and there is my Substack as well. I like the Substack because it's just direct to your inbox, so I know it's going to be. If you follow me on the Substack page, it is going to reach you, and that's you can't guarantee that on any other platform.
Yeah.
So I
I'll
like the
link
fact
down
that I can share sort of news, and I've shared a few exclusives on there.
here.
So the people who do follow me, I do, and I'm not very clever with it, as in I put it out free.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got something like 24 people who very kindly uh, donate payment towards that. It's hugely appreciated. It does mean that when I do take the time out to do that, that I don't feel like uh, I'm losing like money, and that's the problem. We spend so long on the internet these days that every time you do it, it takes time out of the working day. And really, all I want to be doing is sitting there and
Yeah.
with my head down and just getting on with the job.
Yeah.
So it really does help, and it sort of helps me justify that time to spend with it, and it also means I share stuff. I should make it more special for those people, and I apologize to the people who do pay. So every now and again I throw a little something, but on the whole, I just think I'm just trying to spread the news. Actually, Starhenge, if you haven't read it,
Hmm.
you can read the whole of Starhenge completely free on that Substack because I serialized it on there.
Amazing.
I just thought I'm keen for people to discover that universe and to get invested in it, and hopefully buy the book. The book's still available. The collected Starhenge, the Dragon and the Boar
Yeah.
is sort of
I got
pretty
my
much.
floppies, Liam. I got my floppies.
But I do love the hardback. It's a little bit bigger, and it's got a whole bunch of extra stuff at the back.
That's amazing.
So and all the variant covers and everything. But it's and I'm really delighted that it's starting to get picked up in lots of different territories and different countries now. So it's being translated. I think it's 5 different languages now.
Wow.
So I have
Liam, that's
hope
amazing.
that I can really properly get back to that one day, and make that something that is maybe try to get to that magic issue 50 that Tom McFarlane talks
Yes.
about with something personal.
That way you can have a compendium with the entire
Right.
collected works. Yeah.
Well, at the moment, is the longest run I've ever had on anything was the Green Lantern with
Green Lantern.
Grant. That was 2 seasons of 12, so 24 issues altogether. But 4 of those issues were 30 pages long, so I mean it's quite a body of work.
Yeah.
And God, that went fast.
Well,
But,
hopefully one day you can make a return to Green Lantern. I think a lot of Green Lantern fans would really love that too.
well, that's the problem, is that like everything you do, if people like it, there's like, come back to this, and like, when and how?
Can't do it all, right?
I haven't figured out the cloning thing yet. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Liam, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving us some time to delve into Spawn: The Dark Ages. Issue one landed this week. Make sure you get out there and pick it up. There's several different covers that you could pick up. This is the one that I chose. Absolutely beautiful. December, we're getting issue two. Yeah, I could not be happier that you're doing something within the Spawn universe again. And then obviously, if you're not following Savage Sword, the latest issue 11, you own the whole thing, Liam. An amazing storyline, the Mirrors of the Soul. You got 3 different chapters in here, and it looks like we're going to get more of Liam in Conan, Savage Sword, and I could not be happier as a fan of yours.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun, so thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Everyone, I put the links there. You could visit Liam's website. You could go to Albert Moy to get his art, and I'll make sure afterwards I'll put all the links to his socials. Make sure you get over to Substack. That way you get all that amazing information, and there is some back and forth with Liam too. So Liam, thank you for hanging out with me today. Hopefully we could do this again. I would love to have you back after issue 6 so that way we can talk about the story in depth without giving too much away. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, Liam. Well, I wish you the very best Sunday, and thank you again for hanging out with me today.
Absolute pleasure, mate. You take care.
All right, you too, my friend. Bye-bye.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.